Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, December 17th, 2023, and today we are going to be talking about redistricting and the 2024 House elections, and how, as put very well by Reuters, the redistricting battles could determine control of the U.S. House in 2024, and why presently I believe the Democratic Party are the favorites to win back House control in 2024 for a variety of different reasons. In this video, we're going to be exploring not only redistricting, but also the public perception on the House of Representatives, and specifically the Republican Party, taking a closer look at the upcoming special election happening in New York's 3rd Congressional District with the recently ousted, or expelled rather, Congressman George Santos, alongside numerous issues that have come up with the speaker votes and the perception of the GOP in power in the House of Representatives, combined with numerous redistricting victories, the most recent one being in New York, the Democrats have seen over the past year. So, let's take a look at our 2024 House elections and the current state of the race with the 2022 midterm elections as our point of beginning. So in 2022, just around a year and a month ago, the Republican Party won back House control with a net gain of 10 seats across the board. This was far from the expected victory for the GOP, as people like Kevin McCarthy at the time was not the speaker, but rather the minority leader of the GOP, was publicly touting how he expected the Republican Party to gain potentially upwards of 50 to 60 seats. The GOP was very confident going into this election, leading on the generic ballot on Election Day, what was expected to be a roughly 6-point swing from the 2020 presidential election. What ended up happening was that the GOP did in fact win the popular vote. The numbers were correct, but the results didn't translate to a strong victory that they were hoping for. They were looking back at elections like 2010 when Republicans picked up 63 seats in the House of Representatives, and looked at 2014 when Democrats had less than 190 seats. Fast forward to 2022, the GOP picks up just 10. In numerous competitive races, the Democratic Party actually ended up doing well. In most of the competitive districts here, you find that Democrats were able to win. Even some on the Republican expected to win narrowly column, Democrats pulled ahead. On the Democratic side, Democrats won every single seat that was characterized as expected to win narrowly alongside, like I said, many of the competitive districts in this center column. Point being, Democrats did a lot better than the GOP expected. And with that, that gave them a significant opportunity going into the next election. Not only were they very close to winning back the majority, or are very close to winning it back based on present day numbers, it also doesn't help that looking ahead to 2024, the GOP has been throttled by the fact that Democrats have enjoyed the benefits of some defectors from the GOP holding up some parts of the party, not necessarily liberal or centrist members even. Sometimes the most extremist Republicans have taken advantage of such a narrow majority to leverage all of their power, displaying it in full force. What that references is not only the way that we've seen the rules done in a different way because of the far-right members of the party, whether it's committee assignments, whether it's proceedings, whatever it is, we have seen Democrats benefit from the GOP's inability to work as a unified party. Unlike what it was like under Nancy Pelosi on the Democratic side, the GOP was very fractured over the past year. It was a big deal that Nancy Pelosi in her speaker election in 2020 could not, or 2021 rather, after everyone was sworn in, could not win over a significant chunk of the progressive part of the Democratic Party, but was able to do so prior to the speaker vote. There was consideration about replacing her, but ultimately she made enough promises and commitments that she ended up becoming House Speaker with relatively no trouble. The same cannot be said for Kevin McCarthy in a very, very public display of over 15 rounds of voting in this initial nomination process. We found that day after day after day, Kevin McCarthy had to go through 15 different ballots to end up as the House Speaker, despite being the minority leader for quite some time, knowing all of these Republicans. And looking at it, it was a very, very public and humiliating display for the GOP. It showed that in their first act as the majority, they simply could not unify, and it prolonged a number of initiatives that were necessary, including Ukraine aid, including different parts of support for different parts of the country. Pretty much everything was halted because of this 4-day speaker debacle. And while some might think that this makes no impact on the 2024 election, it's about the inefficiencies and the way the public perceives the Republican Party in power. I think there are some very active voters that absolutely do take into account is this governing body able to succeed? And even those who might be so far removed from the political space are still going to see news when there are articles and will remember articles and coverage and whatever it might be of how the speaker vote took such a long time and how this was something that the GOP made a huge embarrassment out of themselves for it. And it isn't just that. When Kevin McCarthy was removed as speaker, the first time we've seen that in United States history, being removed as a House Speaker, it resulted in numerous nominations of other candidates. Jim Jordan, right? Tom Emmer, Mike Johnson, people that ended up being propped up, Steve Scalise even, that ended up losing their House Speaker vote, and it prolonged from the 17th to the 25th of October, an extended period of time, a lot of media scrutiny, a lot of ammunition the Democrats can remind voters of come the next election. Now, that's one part of this. One part of this is the fact that you have also now one of the very few ever members to ever be expelled from the United States House. In the past, it was on the Civil War. It was on trying to incite some level of actual, violence against the American public, against the North at the time. I mean, the last time we've seen expulsions in the House date all the way back to Civil War and immediately after. But this time, we saw Congressman George Santos expelled by not only Democrats, but also members of the Republican House, right? You need more than a majority. You need essentially a supermajority to expel members from the House of Representatives, and Democrats and Republicans got that because George Santos was so exceptionally unpopular and had so many ethics violations that they simply said he needs to go. When you have that perception of the GOP, it doesn't help. On top of the fact that Democrats have already fared by using similar strategies that landed them victories in 2022 and 2023 surrounding issues like abortion, making that a national issue, winning over voters in larger competitive races that are able to translate to down-ballot victories like the ones in the House of Representatives. I don't think we're lost onto how national races, nationalized high-level Senate and governor's races benefited Democrats down the ballot. For instance, in Arizona, Democrats did very well in the House. Even though they lost a seat, they made a lot of the Republican seats that weren't even on the radar for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee competitive, right? You take a look what happened even with the elections in Georgia. Sure, Stacey Abrams didn't do so well, but you know where Democrats did do well? With Raphael Warnock. They were able to win over voters in that way. You look at Kansas. Kansas's 3rd district had a Democratic incumbent who won the district by 12 points. That was meant to be a Trump district, right? It was redistricted and gerrymandered, and Democrats tried to leverage the Democratic Supreme Court in Kansas, tried to raise this as a concern. The Supreme Court, though controlled by Democrats, said there's nothing unconstitutional about Kansas's map, and yet the Democrats still did well, largely in part because Laura Kelly was able to drag a lot of people to the ballot box to vote for a Democrat at the top of the ticket. You see it happening in Maine, Michigan especially. You see it happen in Nevada. Even though Democrats narrowly lost the governor's race, Democrats were winning 3-1 in the House. So you get the gist of how a lot of these ways of messaging and strategizing and campaigning work effectively for Democrats because they've built up this narrative around the GOP that makes them look so ineffective and also equally trying to take away the rights of women across the country. That is what Democrats have been able to successfully do. It's worked in the House, and now, even though they're working with a very similar map to 2022, the entire other side of this is redistricting and how Democrats have benefited. Not only have Republicans in some ways made a fool of themselves, but Democrats have also enjoyed the benefit of numerous back-to-back-to-back court victories. Like I mentioned very early on in this video, the most recent one being New York, but there were plenty that led up to it. So to begin, let's take a look at the first ever real victory for Democrats in the House of Representatives, which was when the United States Supreme Court, lopsided as it is, 6-3 conservative to liberal, ruled that Alabama was intentionally diluting the votes of Black Americans in Alabama, saying that they had to draw a new minority opportunity district, which in code words is a new Democratic district that encompasses minority voters in the district, and then allowed Democrats to now, in this new map, likely flip an additional congressional seat, giving Democrats an overall positive of 1. On top of that, too, you take a look, this has translated to new redraws in states like Louisiana, in states like Georgia, where now there are being reconsidered maps. Georgia recently ruled that they were going to redraw a map. They did redraw it, approved by the state legislature, but the catch here is that the judge originally requested that the district that was asked to draw a new minority district was not to be touched. So now it's going to go back. There are some new considerations being taken into account before December 20th, which is the new deadline for any type of appeals or changes, and guaranteed Democrats are going to go there. So you have Louisiana, which is set to draw by the end of January. They just got a 2-month extension, so that's a little update to this one. Alabama has already benefited Democrats. Georgia very well could. There's also now a new consideration about South Carolina by January 1st, so just in around 2 weeks, the Supreme Court will rule whether South Carolina has racially gerrymandered their map, another state where you see extensive gerrymandering and a benefit to Republicans at the expense of minority voters. That's what Democrats are arguing here. And then also now, in the most recent case, like I said, in the state of New York, where Democrats have won a huge advantage on this new draw. So the reason why I point out these individual cases in Alabama, in Louisiana, in Georgia, in South Carolina is because they all matter. Like this was said, redistricting absolutely matters, but they matter a lot, especially given that Republicans won in the House elections by just a 5-seat advantage. Meaning you take away 5 seats from the GOP, give them to the Democrats are now back in the majority. So yes, every single seat matters. The only downside recently for Democrats is that Republicans just got a victory in North Carolina. They took a 7-7 Democrat to Republican map and made it 3-11. So seemingly, it would counteract these individual gains in Alabama, in Georgia, and Louisiana. And what that would mean is, okay, maybe we're already at a net 0, which is theoretical, which is possible. Democrats do have an opportunity to win an additional seat in North Carolina, maybe make it 4-10, but there's still at a loss, at least in that state. So what comes in and saves Democrats right ahead of the elections? The state of New York. The top court here, which previously ruled that New York had a gerrymander, then their Chief Justice stepped down. A new vacancy occurred because the governor, Kathy Hochul, appointed one of the present justices as the new Chief Justice, then appointed somebody else in that position. So it lopsided the court in favor of Democrats now, because I think that was largely part of the calculus there, and thus, if that calculus was correct, which it seems like it was, Democrats now have the opportunity to redraw. So why is New York all important? Well, New York in the last election has 26 congressional districts that matter. 26 congressional districts that determine where both sides of the aisle end up. Looking at the last election, New York had a result in which Democrats only won around 15 seats out of the 26 in total. That's in huge contrast with 2018, when Democrats had 21 seats and Republicans had 6. At least in 2020, Republicans were able to turn back 2 of the seats, but what we saw here was that Democrats were able to narrow down so many districts in 2018 and showed Republicans what exactly a full display force for the Democrats can be. Democrats got 21 seats, the Republicans 6. So Democrats, after losing a few seats in 2020, decided that, we need to make these districts blue, right? Take New York 22nd and turn it blue. Take New York 22nd and turn it blue. Take this district that we got very close in the 27th and lost by less than a point and make it bluer, right? Even though they were losing it by 11 in 2020. This was a warning sign for Democrats that the next election, New York very well could turn on the Democratic Party. So they tried to draw a map similar to the one in 2018. It was struck down. Instead, a fairer map was imposed, and Republicans obliterated the Democrats. They won 11 seats, contrary to where they were at 8, and Democrats went from 19 to 15. Had New York maintained a delegation similar to 2018, or honestly even similar to where it was in 2020, Democrats might have the House majority today. New York was this breaking point for Democrats because on the governor's race, Kathy Hochul was only winning the state by a margin less than what we saw across many other competitive races. Kathy Hochul only won in New York by a margin of around 5 points. New York is a state that Democrats have consistently won on the presidential by over 20. To put this into more, crazy context, New York was a narrower margin than New Mexico, a narrower margin than Michigan, a narrower margin than Maine, a narrower margin than Georgia, a narrower margin than a plenty of states that no one really expected. Pennsylvania, was 3 times the margin for Democrats, right? So that is why New York was seen as the state where Democrats really need to ensure a safeguard is put in place especially in an event where you have someone like Kathy Hochul running at the top of the ticket. So with that in mind, Democrats now can take this map, and what is largely expected is that Democrats axe a number of districts within the state, and what they're expecting to do in the most extreme case is reduce the number of Republican districts from 11 to 4, meaning Democrats would have a net gain of 7 across the state of New York. Go from 15 to 22, and Republicans from 11 to 4. And with that alone, Democrats are at immediate face value expected to win House control. It becomes much more difficult to see how Republicans do it if that map narrows down. It also doesn't help that the generic ballot polling now shows Democrats in a better position than it did in 2022. Considering how accurate it was in 22, it's something that Republicans should be worried about because they cannot afford even a 1-point shift across these states, right? Take a look at where we were back in 2022. You take a look at Arizona's first, California's 13th. You take a look at New York's 17th, New York's 22nd. Where are we at? We are already at 4 seats. And then you take a look at Iowa's 3rd, Michigan's 10th. All of a sudden, you get to a point of 6 seats decided by 1 point or less in 2022. Again, a shift of 1 point nationally translates to a Democratic victory. Now that coupled with Democrats getting an advantage in the New York House map additionally bolsters the reason why Democrats are favored to win back House control. All of these Republican victories, and honestly, right now only one really, in redistricting in North Carolina has already been counteracted by the Voting Rights Amendment, right? The Voting Rights Act, not amendment, the Voting Rights Act that has given Democrats the ability to draw these minority opportunity districts. With that counteracting North Carolina, you throw into account New York, a state that Republicans were hoping wasn't going to be redrawn. It absolutely is going to be now, and Democrats have an opportunity to gain up to 6 districts, 6 seats in the House, on top of potentially a shift that is already being suggested by generic ballot polling data and likely will occur, as we've seen now with New York's 3rd district potentially could even flip blue in 2024 and early 2024 with a new special election because of George Santos, because of the idea and the view of the Republican Party in that district and across the country. So many factors seem to suggest and point that right now, presently, despite Biden being down in the polls, despite the Senate looking like Democrats are set to lose national control, the House is that one silver lining where nearly everything, with very few exceptions, is pointing in the direction that Democrats are going to win back House control and Hakeem Jeffries will be Speaker in around a year and a half. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.